Hello and welcome to Stuff That Interests Me with me, Dominic Frisby. And today it is my pleasure to welcome to the show a very rich man. He is one of Britain's most successful investors. He's an entrepreneur. He's also a philanthropist. He's also an author. Jim Mellon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dominic.
Now, Jim, one of the secrets of your success, I think it's fair to say, is that you find investment trends, investment themes early, and then you ride them. Is that this kind of secret, or one of your secrets of your success?
Well, I've found some investment trends that have gone the wrong way, I can tell you that. But generally speaking, what I'm looking for is something relatively simple. I don't necessarily want to be the first mover, and often I'm not the first mover, but something that through reading I've developed a concept of that, and I become more knowledgeable than the average investor in, and I meet the right people involved in that particular field, and that I call a money fountain. So a big idea translating to a money fountain. And in the last, say, 20 years, I've had 2 or 3 of those. One was in German property, which has been a very good investment for us, and we still have that, trying to work out what to do with it, to be quite honest. And secondly, in mining, where my partner and I, Stephen Detells, rode the uranium boom in the early 2000s, or mid-2000s, to be quite honest. And then latterly, biotech, which has now morphed into this concept of juvenescence, which is the science of longevity.
Well, that's what we'll talk about now, because the next big trend that you've identified, and you've written a book about it, is longevity, and your book is called Juvenescence. So I guess the place to start, the longest person who ever lived, I understand, and lived to the age of 122. And one of the things you suggest in the book is that before long, the average person in the developed world will live to 110.
That's correct. So within 20 years, we've come to the conclusion, that is Al Chalabi and myself, my long-standing co-author, that the average life expectancy in the developed world, and of course the developing world is catching up in terms of life expectancy as well, notwithstanding short-term interruptions such as we have today in the UK or the United States, will rise to 110 to 120. Now, put that in context, my friend Andrew Scott, who wrote the book The 100-Year Life, which was published last year, which is more of a sort of societal impact book than the one that we've written, he makes a very good analogy. He says, right, Dominic, as an example, this will mean instead of getting up in the morning and having 24 hours ahead of you, you'll get up in the morning and have 36 hours ahead of you. So for the difference between 82 to 85, which is the current life expectancy, and 110 to 120 is that great. And what are we going to do with all that time? How are we going to manage the trajectory of our lives versus what we think of as a trajectory today? And what are the economic impacts of that? And that's what the book is about. And it's super exciting science for me, and I think it'll occupy. I don't think I need any other big ideas, because this will be the biggest industry on the planet. I'm absolutely certain of it. And there'll be many opportunities within it.
The biggest industry on the planet, that's a huge statement. And I was just hearing you talk, there's so many ideas going through my head. But I suppose the place to start is, why are we going to live longer?
Well, science is catching up with the aspiration of an ultra-long life for the first time. People 50 years ago were writing about, I can make you live to 100, or if you do, to follow my formula, or let me have some money to develop my compounds, I'll allow you to live a very long life. But of course that was charlatanism, it was BS, but now there are actually compounds available today, compounds which are in development, and techniques which are here, but which are being developed, which will enable us to live those ultra-long lives. And if I can give you just a couple of examples of those. There is a drug called Rapamycin, which you may have heard of, which comes from...
because I read your book.
Right, well, very good. You're the first person to ever read the book, apart from the people inside the company.
Okay.
But Rapamycin was discovered in Easter Island, whose name is Rapa Nui.
The statues?
The statues, yeah, with the big heads. And the local name is Rapa Nui for Easter Island. And it was in the soil, and it was discovered in the 1970s, and it was used as a cancer drug and also as an immunosuppressant for people who are undergoing bone marrow transplants, as an example, or organ transplants. And it was observed in animal models, so by animal models I mean mice and rats, that it had a very positive longevity effect. So in mice, for instance, they live 25% longer if they are on rapamycin than if they don't take rapamycin.
Now, just sorry to interrupt you for a second, but we hear figures like 25% longer, which is sort of from 80 to 110, it's sort of 25% longer. And you kind of, 25% doesn't sound like that much, but it's an enormous amount.
Actually, 80 to 110,
You're
if I'm
correct,
correct,
it's 33%.
It's about 40%. Yeah, because
Okay.
it's 30 over 80. So, sorry.
And there, in that little mathematical exchange, is why Jim is a better investor
but
than
I'm
I am.
making the point that it's
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
bigger
Yeah.
than 25%.
Okay.
All right, but rapamycin on its own in human beings won't add 25% to your life, because in smaller animals, these treatments tend to have a proportionately larger effect than they do in larger animals such as ourselves. However, rapamycin is toxic in humans, so if I gave it to you today, it would have negative effects as well as positive effects. So they're working on something called rapalogs, which are analogues of or derivatives of rapamycin, which will be on the market in the next 3, 4, 5 years, which will have longevity effects. But the drug companies can't say, I'm going to make you live another 25%, because they can't hang around for the next 50 years to see whether you live another 25% or not. So they'll make other claims for it. They'll say that it will, restore your immune system, as an example, which it does in elderly people.
Is that why it has this longevity effect, because of the immune system, or does it stop cells breaking down? Or?
Basically, what it does is it acts on the mTOR pathway, which is one of the key pathways of aging. mTOR stands for mechanistic target of rapamycin, and it is one of the key pathways that regulates your potential decline into old age and senescence. And this interrupts that negative effect, and it interrupts it brilliantly. But rapamycin on its own, which is here today, is only one of the elements that's going to lead to that cumulative effect of going to 110 or 120, because aging is a multifactorial process. It's not predetermined. We're not destined to age. We're not destined to die. But it happens for a variety of many reasons. Possibly 2,000 genes are implicated in aging. So taking the key genes and manipulating them is going to be a very key part of this process. So that gets to the next stage. We've got some drugs that will work today, including rapamycin. Metformin is another one. You should be taking a mini aspirin. You probably are on a daily basis.
A mini aspirin?
Yeah.
Because it thins the blood?
It does, and it will cut your risk of a heart attack by 50% and your risk of a stroke by 80%.
So how many grams would that be?
75 to 81 milligrams. And you can get it at Boots, it'll cost nothing.
Yeah.
Or very little. And you take one a
20p or
day.
something, yeah. 20p or something. It costs, aspirin is the cheapest drug in the world.
Yeah, but these are mini ones. They're specifically designed for, they're called daily aspirins.
Okay.
And if you take that, Dominic, it will have anti-cancer property, and it's observed in millions of people, and reduce your risk of a stroke and heart attack. And that's a simple observation, right?
Do you take one every day?
I do, but you must go off it 1 week a month, because it has potential bleeding effects, stomach effects, basically. So just, take it, but 3 weeks of every month, basically.
And what other kind of little lifestyle things are going to make us live longer?
Don't smoke. 14 years off your life.
14?
On average, yeah. Lung cancer is the major cause of, major cancer, and lung cancer is 80% smoking related, and cancer is the second biggest killer in the United Kingdom and in the developed world. The biggest killer being?
Heart attacks?
Exactly. Well, no, cardiovascular disease.
Okay.
Right, so strokes, heart attacks, chronic heart failure, atrial fibrillation, that sort of thing, basically. And so 160,000 people on the planet die every day, all right? And of those, 100,000 plus die of 5 diseases, which are all related to aging. Cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia, respiratory disease, and diabetes, stroke, obesity.
Okay, now, if I live another, I'm 48 now.
Yeah, you're not even halfway through your life.
Now, if I make it to, oh really, I'm going to live to 100, based on the current projections?
Oh no, you'll live more than 100, I think. I mean, I'm talking about the life expectancy for people like you and me will be 120. For children,
For us two sitting here, I know that you're 60 years old and you look fantastic on it.
Oh, thanks,
Your
Dominic.
life expectancy is going to be 120 as well.
well, my life expectancy is, but whether I make it or not is down to my own lifestyle, to environmental conditions like, do I get killed in a road traffic accident or a murder, or am I in a plague or famine or whatever. But
And your life expectancy goes up if you make it past 55 or something, doesn't
it
it?
does, because your risk of a heart attack goes down.
Okay.
So the stress factors, it's particularly in males, that cause us to have heart attacks and strokes, diminish as we get, supposedly, although I feel quite stressed with this book coming out. I might have a heart attack here. But your life expectancy goes up until about your 75, and then it kind of goes off a cliff. But that is changing. That is about to change.
But if I live this longer life, how well is my brain going to be functioning? How well is my body going to be functioning? I mean, am I going to be like this, or am I going to be a happy, healthy, sprightly 95?
Well, I think the latter, because what science is trying to aim for is what they call a health span, which is basically lives lived in a healthy condition. Now, at the moment, people of 65 years old, so I've only got 5 years to go, normally have at least one of the 5 diseases that I mentioned. And it's a bit like whack-a-mole. If you cure one of them, you'll get another one.
Okay.
And so if I cure you of cancer, you may well get dementia, all right? And then you just get progressively worse. And that's our image of old age. We think of people in their 80s sitting in a sort of plastic chair in a nursing home, dribbling away, being medicated, and just waiting to die. That image is going to go, and people will live a welderly, i.e. old age with good health life, rather than an elderly life. And I can go through multiple technologies that are going to enable that. But just getting back very briefly, the two things that will take us, you and me, to 110, 120, but will take children who are born today to potentially 150 or 200 or whatever, are genetic
150?
engineering. Oh, easily. Genetic engineering and stem cell therapies, or regenerative medicine, basically. And genetic engineering is already here. You've read about CRISPR. You know what CRISPR is. CRISPR is a new gene editing technique that only came out or was discovered in 2012, subject to lots of patent disputes, of course, because there's lots of money at stake. But CRISPR is already being used to edit out in embryos monogenetic defects, which might lead to something like cystic fibrosis or sickle cell anemia or Duchenne muscular dystrophy, one of the orphan diseases that causes so much misery in the world. But from an aging point of view, CRISPR, because there are 2,000 genes implicated in aging, could allow us to be re-engineered genetically in the relatively near future. So this is not something that's 20 years away. This is something that's 5 to 10 years away. And then stem cells, which have been around obviously for a very long time in terms of potential therapeutic use, are now being used in many heart attack victims with full restoration of the heart post the injection of stem cells. And they're going to be used widely, very widely in the next 10 years. And both of those factors, coupled with pharmacological intervention, coupled with lifestyle intervention, i.e. eating the right food, which more and more people are doing, not smoking, will add cumulatively to that 110, 120. Meantime, the diseases of aging, cancer and heart attacks in particular, are going down in incidence very rapidly in the Western and developed world, basically. Heart attacks, cardiovascular diseases declining by 2 to 4% per year in the developed world. And cancer, as you probably know, the new immunotherapies are having biblical effects in terms of remission and survival rates among cancer patients, basically. The dramatic improvements since the 1970s.
So I see this is an aggregation of many things.
It is, but longer term, and as you saw in the book, it is thought by some people, who are thought still to be wacky, that we will go in for a kind of annual or biannual restoration into a hospital environment or into a clinical environment where our whole tissues will be re-engineered. We will be infused with factors that come from youthful blood, which people are using already, which have a very positive effect on older people, which is why in California you're getting some younger people basically selling their blood to effectively older Silicon Valley types, and they're being hooked up, I bet Donald Trump's, has regular injections of youthful blood.
Looking at his wife, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, right. But I mean, it gets back to what I said. Science is catching up with aspiration for the first time ever. And the first anti-aging trial of significance is just about to get underway. Do you know what that is?
No.
Right, so there's a man called Nir Barzilai, very famous, very eminent, amazing scientist who's based at the Albert Einstein University in New York, which is a very leading longevity research institute. And he's got the funding together to do a trial of Metformin. Now, Metformin is a diabetic drug which came out in the early 1950s and has been used by hundreds of millions of people. So if you are unfortunate enough to get diabetes, the first thing they'll give you is Metformin. It's a generic drug. It's not toxic. It's an amazing compound. And basically what it is, it's a glucophage. It goes around your body and takes sugar out. All right? And diabetics who take Metformin live on average longer than healthy people without diabetes who don't take Metformin, whereas the average diabetic will live 8 years less than the healthy people. So the formalization of this trial is underway now, and or about to go underway, and they're looking for events. They're looking in a population of over 75 years old to see how many of them die or have a heart attack or whatever, those on Metformin and those not on Metformin. And although Metformin carries no prospect of making any money because it's a generic drug, the fact if it works, it validates the idea that there are compounds out there that affect longevity. It'll be the first formal trial of a longevity product, and it's very exciting, very exciting.
Jim, we're coming to a close. I've got two questions that I want to ask you, or two areas I want to ask you about. And the first one is, what are the economic implications of all this? Are we going to turn into kind of Japan on steroids, or and how are we going to fund our lifestyles if we're living that much longer?
Well, it's a really important question. Now, we are at the same time as we're the first cohort about to live ultra-long lives. And by the way, I just want to point out that in 1900, the average life expectancy in this country was 41 years. Today, it's in the early 80s.
That's incredible.
So it's not such a leap to imagine that we could live to 120. So in just over 100 years, we've doubled life expectancy. So why wouldn't we be able to, given modern technology and the unveiling of the human genome and the discovery of DNA and so forth, why wouldn't we be able to live to 120? It's not such a great leap. So in terms of the economic impact, well, at the moment, we are born, we learn, we earn, we burn out, we retire, and we expire. That's what everyone thinks that their life is destined to be. That's a cycle. That life will be changed. Learning will be a continuum all the way through because of technological advancement. You and I, this camera setup will be completely different in 10 years. It'll be something else. And it's a much faster rate of technological turnover than ever was before. And so we'll have multiple jobs. We'll have to retrain continuously. And we won't be able to retire at 65 or 68, which is the retirement age for people like you and me in the future, given the government projections. It'll be 85 or 90. Furthermore, fertility is being addressed. So why is it that women get the menopause at 50 and can't reproduce post 50? It's amazing the evolution, given that women now live to, in many cases, over 100. Why do they live so long when their reproductive years are curtailed at the age of 50 or even before? And that's going to change. So women will have the choice of having children much later in life. And that trajectory, which I mentioned earlier, which we regard as established, the conventional wisdom, is going to be a completely different one. We live in a world of potential consumer abundance with automation. What are we going to do? We're going to have hobbies. We're going to go traveling a lot more, which is why I think things like Carnival Cruise Lines is probably a very good investment, or Saga, anything that caters to people who are older. Because people live in good health, the burden of healthcare, which is huge, 85% of healthcare in the United States is spent on the last 2 years of life, all right? So because people won't be, dying in an agonized hospital bed scenes, they'll just sort of drop dead of exhaustion at the age of 110 or 120. with possibly no prior warning, but certainly won't be disease-ridden, the burden of healthcare will go down, the burden of social care will go up, and social care will become a much more valued profession. People at the moment in social care are not highly valued. They're the lowest paid in society, but they will become the true professionals of the future, whereas the lawyers, the accountants, the doctors even, will be automated. And they will be the less valued professions, basically, the ones who are being automated out of existence. So human-on-human interaction is going to be much more important in the future. And children should be guided towards that sort of job or career rather than the traditional jobs of, mummy and daddy's era, basically.
Very interesting. Jim Mellon, I mean, how interesting has it been listening to you talk? If you want to find out about the investment implications of all of this, where to invest your money, how to make a fortune from us all living longer, then you will have to read Jim and Al's book, which is called Juvenescence. Jim, why don't you give me a quick plug for the book?
Well, thank you, Dominic. The proceeds go to charity, to longevity charities as it happens, many of which are starved of cash, but all of which are very important to the crusade of us living longer, basically. And the book is out next week, so the 25th of September. It's on Amazon, it's on the Juvenescence website, it's at Harriman House, and we're super excited about it. It is 440 pages. Please read it, because the first part is science heavy, but it's important that everyone knows why they're going to live so much longer. The second is the investment implications, and the third is the factors that are going to keep you alive for the next 10 or 20 years so you can take advantage of this of this new technology.
There are also environmental implications, aren't there, as well? The depletion of the world's resources and so on, is with more and more people being in the world.
Well, I think actually Juvenescence is going to lead to a stalling in the growth of the world's population, because at the moment, as you know, fertility rates in the developed world are below replacement. Yeah, in most countries. Here in the UK, we're below replacement, 1.8 children per woman, and it needs 2.2 children per woman to replace the population. So the only area where the population is growing rapidly is in Africa. In Asia, it's stalled as well. And I think in Africa, with prosperity, you'll see a decline. You already are in some countries in fertility rates. So I'm not worried about too many people, but those people will be living much, much longer. And so those consumers in later life will be consuming very different things to Facebook and Snapchat and that sort of stuff. And so the new industries are the industries that cater to the older, perhaps more, what's the right way of putting it? Wiser, yeah, or tempered people. And that's why I think so many industries will be upended. The life insurance industry is finished as it currently stands, all right? The medical industry is going to change dramatically. When you go to your doctor now, it's almost primitive. They're still tapping your knees. Oh, yeah. They're still looking in your ear and all that sort of stuff, which they did in Victorian times. Every time you go to a doctor in 10 years' time, your genome will be sequenced as a matter of course, and the machine will discover what's wrong with you, not the doctor. The doctor will be like a front-of-house receptionist. So many things are changing in this world, but I'm an optimist. I mean, I think if you can accept change, this is a brilliant period to be alive.
Jim Mellon, I want to talk for hours, but we haven't got time. Jim Mellon, thank you very much. And thank you very much for watching and for listening. And we'll be back with more stuff that interests me next week.